Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the university and to FORA for inviting me, and for staff doing a great job to get us here and get us organized. It takes a lot to pull me out of the end of a semester right in the midst of finals, and a lot waiting for me on the way back, but this was really, when I saw it, too important, really an opportunity to pass up. So I'm really happy to be here. Yesterday was really stimulating and actually had the effect of sending me back to the hotel to reflect on what I heard and to update the presentation some. But thank you for making me feel welcome and putting us on Miami time. We had an 8:30 start and it's 9:12, so it's perfectly on time for Miami. I'm going to talk about, and I've been asked to speak to this question of how complete planning affects community prosperity. And I'm going to look at that through the prism of placemaking and what I've been able to gather over a series of years, and really looking at a lot of built actual projects. And so I think really what this talk is about is how complete places affect community prosperity, because you're at the point of implementation now. You've done some really heavy lifting in the early years to get the university going, to do some demolition, to get FORA established. A lot of intergovernmental efforts have gone forward, and now I think part of the reason we're here is to really take a hard look at implementation and how this idea of placemaking and can be used to help create value for more enduring, more resilient communities, because you're creating a place that you want to grow in value as time goes forward, both for the private sector, the developers, to make this financially feasible, for the residents, the businesses, the students who are going to occupy and bring this place to life, and for the community and the many communities around here that are going to benefit from what's achieved year to year, decade to decade, as this incredible effort moves forward. My first career was actually in economic development. My background's in planning, and I learned a lot in upstate New York, where I'm from, about the failure of communities to reinvest in the character of place and to really take care of the built environment over time. It's not just about getting and retaining that one industry you think is the savior. And if you can just look to Detroit for examples of depending too much on one industry. In the case in the Capital District where I was from, Schenectady was the example where, hey, we had GE, there was nothing to ever worry about, that industry was going to sustain that community forever. And as time goes by, industries change, and what's left is a community that either was taken care of and reinvested in over time or was not. And a place like, this is Charleston, you're looking at here in the slide, which has gone through every challenge imaginable over its almost 350-year history, suffered a civil war, suffered a complete loss of industry over time, major disasters, including a gigantic earthquake in the 19th century after the Civil War, as well as Hurricane Hugo. But it's been a resilient place that people reinvest in, they come back to, industry comes back to, because it has such a great character, such a great sense of place, that it attracts people to return, to stay, and to reinvest over time. Part of my message is we are and we can continue to create these types of places today. And yesterday Peter Katz spoke about a terrific project that I'm very familiar with as well, called Baldwin Park, which is the old Orlando Naval Training Center. There's a lot of lessons to learn from this, but also from many other projects. So it's not like you're starting from scratch here. It's not like there's not plenty of examples, built examples, private sector driven examples, many of them involving very close partnerships with the public and private sector to learn from. And we'll be sharing some of that with you today through all the different discussions. A lot of those examples are in the book that Victoria mentioned, the placemaking book, where I had an opportunity to travel a lot around the country and have continued to travel. These are cases, and they're cases where I had the opportunity to meet with the developers, to meet with the designers, to learn from what worked and what didn't, and in the best tradition of the Urban Land Institute. There's lots of good information out there to learn from at this point. Your challenge is you have an enormous property to contend with. And it's not a matter of just small interventions here or there. Victor will speak to the idea of retrofit because there is property in many existing communities that are kind of more contained opportunities. But the heart of the opportunity is in this very large property. And what you're really facing is the approach to settlement, to creating settlements in this vast territory. And you know, we can look historically at how people approach that, how they approach their own ideas for creating places and building communities. And here's the classic view of Savannah being laid out. Very clear, precise ideas about how the public realm, the private realm would be organized and responding to the needs of people and industries at that time. You're faced with a question: are you going to pursue many of the ideas that are outlined in the base reuse plan for complete communities, mixed use, integrated, walkable, transit-oriented communities? Are we going to create cities on a hill, or are we going to continue to create subdivisions on hills? It's really the default, and sometimes it's tough to break out of this inertia that continues to push us toward the same models. But times and people are changing dramatically. We heard a lot of discussion about innovation hubs yesterday, about changing lifestyle preferences, demographics. It's always important for us to remember that we, as individuals, are not the market. We aren't necessarily in tune with our personal choices as to the way people want to work, to live, to carry out their lives. And we have to continually turn to the next generation, the coming generation, and understand their preferences. And I spent some time thinking about that yesterday. You don't have to read all the words on these. We know they're being archived. You'll be able to look over them afterward. But this is one of my favorite accounts of the founding of a community and how citizens came together to define what they felt was a complete community back in the 18th century when Shirley Center was founded. And they spoke about the 5 senses that constitute a complete community. And at that time, they identified them as home, government, religion, education, and commerce. And each of those ideas were connected with a specific building or building type. Each of them were organized in a plan, a very specific physical plan around public space, around the common. And today, if we were to continue this conversation, you know, we could bring up other ideas. Nature, which was taken for granted then, is very important now for integrating within our communities. Arts and culture often gets forgotten in this discussion about creating innovation hubs and technology and industry. The people, the creative class type people who are being attracted, or you're trying to attract to those industries and to make the kinds of institutions and places you're looking to build here, they're very interested in nature, in arts and culture, and health would be another, healthy living. And you could continue this kind of dialogue, this discussion about what do people want, what do they define as the essential building blocks of a complete community today. The dilemma is that our development models for decades have been of the single-use, isolated, very specialized type. And this inertia continues to churn out the isolated apartment complex, the isolated subdivision, and other pieces. Very difficult to reassemble these without rethinking how they're laid out. And also, when you start thinking about what I mentioned before, think about what the millennials want, the lifestyle that they want to pursue, their interests. There's great information, there's great studies coming out through the Urban Land Institute with surveys and documenting a lot of the very different ideas they have about living, working spaces, and entertainment. Think about the different types of households, different types of people that you'll need to accommodate. There's many more younger, single households, couples with all different interests, very different types of interests. And it doesn't look like this anymore. This is my demographic. This is the Ozzie and Harriet one, 2 kids, 2 parents at home. We were a big part of the market after World War II, and we've been shrinking ever since. And I have to modify this because I've got one of those as well. And then I realized last night this is embarrassing to her because now she looks like that. And she also has taught me, in this photo, she's 14, that Doctor Who is cool again. She's got her Doctor Who shirt on. Go figure. But look at the demographics. Look at this factoid. Almost 1/3 of Americans now live alone. In cities, 40% or more households contain a single occupant. Nearly 50% of Americans are single, called singletons. But they're also a huge economic force. And when you look at the development patterns, the types of places and communities we're creating, they are not catering to the needs of this huge demographic. Things like live-work space, live-work concepts are very appealing to this group. And if you think that's hard or there's not enough examples, think again. There's a whole book. There's actually 2 books, I think, they're out now on live-work planning and design. Tom Dolan's a Californian. He's been doing this for a couple decades. So if you want to see some examples of that, pick up his book on the zero commute housing option. Very appealing. Office parks, the office park model. There was great discussion yesterday by some of the panelists about how tired and worn out this is. I spent a lot of time, I lived in the Research Triangle in North Carolina, and there was a lot of discussion back then about how are we going to reinvigorate the Research Triangle Park, which is just office, and 50,000 cars drive in at the beginning of each day and 50,000 cars drive out, and it's a big snarling traffic mess. There's no mix of uses. It's also not at all the way the current generation looks at work. I actually got to watch the Steve Jobs movie finally, Flying Out Here, and reflecting on the creative class type culture and their need for social contact and the informality between not only between buildings but within the workspace itself. And you look at the bottom here, you see the slide in Google headquarters of people expressing a very different idea of the workplace. And innovation itself is really driven by this external and internal contact, the social milieu that can be created. There was a great story from my dean who she was speaking to an office developer who was moving his daughter into a university, and the first thing she asked him to do, this is an office developer, was to remove the desk from her dorm room. And he's like, well, where are you going to work? You're not going to have a desk. And she said, I've got technology. Wherever my laptop is, wherever my smartphone is, I can work. I'm not going to take up space in my dorm room for a stupid desk. So he helped her move it out, and then he noticed all the way down the dorm hallway, all of the students were doing the same thing. They were ditching their desks, and he said, oh my God, I'm an office developer, and none of these people are going to occupy office space anymore. Or if they do, they're going to occupy very different office spaces. They may do it part-time. They can work anywhere. They can work in this room. They can work in Starbucks, and they do. So it's a changing universe, and this niche that's not a niche, it's like over 30% of the workforce that Richard Florida talks about as the creative class is what a lot of you are after. It's what a lot of universities want to attract and to retain, to begin businesses, to be entrepreneurs, to stay in your communities. And we heard discussion yesterday about trying to retain some of those people. And understanding what keeps them, what attracts them, what keeps them is vital to your efforts. Another piece of the puzzle, retail. Certainly the old formats of enclosed shopping malls and strip malls are not as appealing to current generation. How are they going to get there if fewer and fewer young people don't even get driver's license? I've got one of these in my house. He's going to be 18. He's going to go to college next year. He doesn't even have a driver's license. He doesn't want one. And in this survey, when they asked young people, they defined young people broadly, 18 to 39, why don't you want a driver's license? 40% said, I prefer to bike, walk, or take public transportation. Now, most of them don't have that option. because of the way we've designed communities. But if you design communities where they have that option, they will choose you. That's the choice they're looking for. Second one was, I don't have enough time. They view the whole driving thing, parking thing, as just one big hassle. And then the last one is a big one. It's too expensive to own, insure, and maintain a vehicle. Why would I want to waste a third of my income on a car and taking care of that when I could use it for all the other fun things I want to do? How are they going to get there? Hey, dude, I got technology. How am I going to shop? And I've got a smartphone. I can have stuff delivered to my door. I can have a choice of 1,000 more products and 1,000 more brands than you have down at the mall or the corner store. Why would I want to be limited by what's just down the street in a shopping center? Huge impact. And the role of technology in their lives, in society in general, is bringing about enormous changes. It's also tied up in the personal identity of young people. Really worshiping their new iPads and new technologies. It doesn't mean that they're isolating themselves off just to use the technology, though. The technology allows them to be anywhere, to be social, to be in public space, to be in cafes, and be connected, to be working, to be shopping, to be doing whatever it is they want in their daily lives, while being in places they want to be, rather than places they have to be. Another trend that Brooke Warwick, who's a great observer of demographic and lifestyle trends, always speaks at the ULI conferences, is something he called voluntary simplicity, especially coming out of the recession and for younger people. There's a real shift away from the more formal consumer-oriented activity and towards public space, premium on spending quality time with family and friends, and the implications for real estate are there's going to be higher demand for well-designed, low-key gathering places that are conducive to inexpensive, spontaneous interaction. Not a food court, but some places where you can go and you can do a whole variety of things. And cafe culture, is essential. It's a key part of this whole interactive, connective story. And then you could go on through the rest of the real estate industry, certainly hotels, the way we've done hotels as these isolated, single-use pieces really defeats the purpose of connecting people and bringing them into complete communities. How does the younger generation do it? They don't even go to the hotel. Airbnb. You can look it up for Monterey, Carmel, any place. When I took our students to Chicago this fall for the Urban Land Institute, instead of staying in the hotel with me, Airbnb. They stayed all over the city. If you do create a hotel in a new development, don't isolate it. Don't put it off the highway somewhere by itself where there is absolutely no synergy between the business traveler and the rest of the community, the development. Reston Town Center is a classic case of locating the Hyatt, embedding it in the town center right across from the office space where they're trying to get the executives to locate their businesses, the Fortune 500 companies. They look out the window of the hotel and what do they see? They see an environment where they can have business meetings, where there's entertainment, where there's shopping, where there's steakhouses, and right nearby now there's also high-end residential. The dilemma is that these older conventional suburban pieces, the pieces that would be criticized as suburban sprawl, don't add up to complete communities. When you add more and more and more of them, you add more traffic because they're spread out. They are automobile dependent. So all of the fears that people have here and many other places about destroying the quality of life because of development are really borne out if you follow a completely automobile dependent sprawl pattern. It's also a problem that if they are isolated pieces like the retail piece that's just created for shopping, they're creating disposable places. Once the life cycle plays out for that big box or for that particular center, it's no longer viable. We'll throw it away. We'll clear it. We'll build something else. But there is no sense of creating a longer-term, enduring place because it's only one use. There's only one reason to be there. The idea of creating value by taking a more integrated and mixed-use approach is not new to the development world. Vince Graham is a fantastic developer. He's actually worked in Charleston, done some great infill work there. He's also built entire communities, one of which is Ion, which was actually designed by Victor Dover's firm. And there's this great quote from Vince that I always share with my students, and it's contrasting that separated, single-use, isolated, automobile-dependent world with the more compact, mixed-use, walkable world of development. And he says, if what you sell is privacy and exclusivity, then every new house, in the model on the left, and every new shop, and every new office, and every new institution is viewed as a degradation of the amenity. You're bringing more traffic, you're taking away my open space, which I don't own, but I think I own because it's outside my house. You're degrading what I view as this privatopia. But if what you sell is community, then every new house, and every new shop, and every new public space, and every new institution is viewed as an enhancement of the asset. And I mean, I experienced this in my own research for a project called Southern Village in Chapel Hill, where I had focus groups with the residents, and they couldn't wait for the village center, for the mixed-use development to come. That's why we're here. We want to be able to walk to get our everyday goods. We want to be able to walk kids to school. We'd like the option to worship. All of those things now in place. Schools, church, supermarkets, all within that complete community. Richard Florida, who I mentioned earlier, published a great article just last year on what draws creative people. And he says, in part, it's the quality of place. And he identified 3 dimensions of that. Number 1, what's there? The combination of both the built environment and the natural environment, a stimulating, appealing setting for the pursuit of creative lives. You have a great natural environment, and that was noted yesterday. I think it was Mr. Culligan's chart, and he had the 5 dots going across like this is top shelf. But the built environment is equally important for attracting these folks. And if you don't institute a development pattern that protects that environment and creates quality places, then you could end up degrading it and really killing the goose that laid the golden egg. Who's there is the second one. Diverse people of all ethnicities, nationalities, religions, backgrounds. Creative people, the creative class, are attracted to diversity. And then third, what's going on there? The vibrancy of, it's not just about the job, it's not just about, I want to go where the jobs are. This group decides where to go based on these other things. And this one is, what's the vibrancy of the street life? Is there a cafe culture? What's the art scene like? What's the music scene like? Is there a visible presence of people doing stuff, outdoor activities? Lots of active, exciting, creative goings on. So 3, I think, really important things to think about as you continue this discussion of creating the innovation hub and nurturing the blossoming, really, of the university into a community. The Knight Foundation also did a huge survey on what they called the soul of the community with Gallup, and concluded that there were 3 main qualities that attach people to place. 1, the social offerings, such as entertainment venues and places to meet. Not low taxes, low crime, all the things we've been taught to, where are the quality schools and all those things. Those things are important. It's not like they go away. But the things that people identify, what attaches me to this place, what causes me to move here, to stay here, to be dedicated to it, to want to reinvest in it, social offerings, openness, how welcoming a place is. And then third, the area's aesthetics. How is physical beauty and its green spaces. Very surprising for a lot of people when the results of that came out. You have the world-class natural environment here, and you should do everything you can not only to protect it, but also to leverage it as part of your identity. We did some work in Lexington for the Knight Foundation, and part of the discussion there was they have a real world-class natural environment with the horse farms and the beautiful rolling hills. And the example that people were pointing to there was, this one, Napa Valley. And Napa Valley, not only in the photographs, Napa's done a great job of branding themselves, using that fantastic, beautiful environment. A powerful sense of place that involves the interconnections between the region's imagery, its art, its culture, its economy, its events. There's a whole slideshow that went through all of this showing how the natural environment was really interconnected with the branding of Napa Valley. And, you know, if you, you know, this gets back to the fear that you could totally screw it up if you're not careful. I mean, there's some beautiful environments in these slides in the background, in the mountains, you know, there's a lot of agreement now that we can't just keep going along this same pattern, this unsustainable pattern, and ignoring the impacts. You also have great existing communities. You have great settlements here that you can and should study and learn from. Just because it's been around for a while doesn't mean that it's not something you could learn from and start to possibly recreate. And when you look at a place like, these shots are from Carmel, look at the intimacy and how tight the spaces are. You have a lot of land, but don't make the mistake of spreading out everything all over thousands of acres. You have to start by creating a sense of place right from the start, incrementally, with each stage of development. And you have great examples nearby to study and learn from. Here's another seaside. This is actually near another seaside in the Florida Panhandle. So here are the pieces spread out and dispersed. The commercial pieces, the residential pieces, and then the resort pieces slapped up against the beachfront. This is a perfect path for destroying the amenity that people come there to enjoy. So now I'll share with you, oh, and here's the open space that's left over. The lawyers do want us to make sure nobody falls into that retention pond. Now here's a few ideas about how to approach placemaking and create value in the process. So number one is the kind of reattainment of what is neighborhood scale, what is walkability. And there's the rule of thumb, the 5-minute walk, the quarter-mile radius, the concept of things being within walking distance, that you actually have destinations you can get to for your daily living. You can extend that idea to block structure. So the 5-minute walk, 1,320 feet, put that in terms of a block dimension and you have walkable blocks. You have a fabric of streets and blocks. This one's really important when you're dealing with the scale you're facing here, incremental placemaking. And you can't do this in a dispersed, scattershot way. You must focus your efforts and create a sense of place right in the beginning stages. Phase your development in smaller, more concentrated increments. Build 2 sides of a street. Build all sides of a public space so that people have a strong sense of what is this place going to be as it develops, as it builds out. Here's an example of that, a project we did through the university. I don't know if you can see these down there, but each of the colors, this was a big box site with mostly parking lots. There was a phasing strategy for moving the boxes around, looking at what was on the ground, and in each phase, in each section, creating a distinctive place as well as leveraging the types of uses that were there. So at the bottom, there were design-oriented businesses that were in warehouses that were internally focused. Those are being turned inside out and framing a public space at the bottom of that. There was an existing culinary school. Yesterday's discussion about the industries here and the opportunities to tap agriculture, whole foods, I mean, the organics and everything. Great discussion. How about a culinary school? And how about one that doesn't sit off by itself on a highway, but maybe fronts a public space? Maybe it actually has some of the things that are being used as ingredients grown right nearby. You're in this rich agricultural region. How about connecting development with the industries that are here and shaping places in this incremental concept? Mixing housing types. You know, don't put all of the apartments in one place, all the townhomes in another. This gets back to the desire for a more diverse community, to have people of different incomes, different points in their lives, being able to live and work and interact within the same community. If you put all of the $500,000 single-family homes in one 100-acre, 200-acre, 300-acre place, you're building homogeneity. You're not building a complete place. And then thinking carefully about your commerce, your retail strategy. It's not that you're not going to need big box stores or mainstream retailing. There are places and ways actually to organize that also can still be very walkable, very engaging places. But think really carefully about what commerce makes sense in connection to the natural beauty of the area, with the industries that are here already, with the agriculture. This is a great example of a simple two-story building that is the magnet at the end of the day on the coast of the Panhandle, where everyone goes to have that cocktail or non-alcoholic drink if you prefer, but to watch the sunset. And it's just set up perfectly, it's simple, and it's successful. It's connecting with a sense of place with your commerce. You can do this, I've mentioned this possible connection with your agriculture. Here's a great example from a community called Serenbe outside of Atlanta. One restaurant like this that has a great entrepreneur, a great chef, cuisine that connects to the local region, and a beautiful setting, that's worth a dozen, 2 dozen chain restaurants. It connects and establishes and reinforces your sense of place, your identity. One thing, Victor's going to talk about streets. I don't think too many people have said anything about parking yet. This is a big one. And for the foreseeable future, we're going to still have a lot of cars. We're going to need to stockpile a lot of cars. It doesn't have to mean that parking lots and parking structures destroy your potential to create a more walkable, complete community. This is like the third building built in the first shopping center in the United States, Country Club Plaza in Kansas City. It was a parking garage. But they built the parking garages and inserted them into the fabric in a way that it was still walkable. You didn't have to see just parking garage or just parking lot. The focus was on the retail and the retail environment. This is what happens when you think you have a parking problem and you need a parking solution to your problems. We did this throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s. We destroyed a lot of downtowns solving our parking problems. And it doesn't just happen with parking lots. This is just a couple years ago on the campus of the University of Akron, where I went to speak, and they had just unveiled this fantastic new parking structure that absolutely killed this section of the street. You can handle parking in a whole variety of ways. And as you're doing things incrementally, you don't want to get into expensive structures. You can line streets with structures, have parking in back for a whole variety of uses. The world does not come to an end. It works very, very nicely. It creates a strong sense of place. These are just surface lots internal to a block. When you do build structures, some sides can be open on service streets. They can share both commercial and residential users, as in the case of this one. And then on the residential side, as you go toward a residential neighborhood, you can line the garage. You can civilize it, and anybody would be happy walking down the street in this case. Victor will talk a lot about streets as civic space. This is another crucial piece of the puzzle. The public realm creates value. It creates addresses where people want to live, shop, dine, work. It creates value for real estate. That is really irreplaceable. And streets like this don't create so much value unless it's just about getting somebody to swing in with a car, pick something up, and swing out. Very limited. And if you do it right, the street can continue to provide great addresses, great value over time. This is Core Mirbeau. This is one of my favorites, and this is in Victor's book. Over centuries, in fact, and they become places to decorate during holidays, they become places to celebrate, and they become places to congregate. And you don't have to have lots of them, but every community should have a great street, should have some great public spaces. And if you do it right, the artists will recognize it as well, and they'll become postcards, and they'll be painted, and they'll be celebrated by the community. Create outdoor rooms. And this is the continuation of creating value through the public realm. The note from the developer here, we found that public amenities added value to private lots. And not just one, so why have one, right? have multiple public spaces, have public spaces with different uses, different functions throughout a community, some more residential in character, some maybe more oriented toward education, some more bustling commercial areas, and disperse them, place them in neighborhoods, structure them as a whole network of public space in communities. How do we know that it creates value? We have a lot of evidence from the developers of the communities, but we also have things like this thesis by Andrew Miller, who he was a fellow in our program. He now works for Forest City. He did this for MIT for his MS in real estate development. And Andrew looked at public spaces, studied them, and not just the spaces, but also well-designed streets, boulevards, and how they created value for the lots that touched and were adjacent to great public spaces, great streets. And it was measurable. And so the darker the space, the more valuable the property. And as you roll away, the value rolls off. But then if you redesign, if you do a pinwheel orientation like this, you can draw some of that value along great streets, and you can extend the value and create these value gradients. So lots of lessons from complete communities. That was a quick dash through some, but there's lots to learn from both a planning and design and coding perspective as well as a development perspective. And here's a few more snippets on the studies. Epley and two studied many traditional neighborhood developments in these different states. 4 to 25% premium for the housing produced. A premium for lots bordering preserves. You're going to have a lot of open land, a lot of potential for this. People like open space. They like living next to open space. 19 to 35% premium in this study. And then Miller's study, 22% premium for units within 100 feet of a neighborhood park, and then premiums for the smallest lots, really off the chart. So rethinking, oh, those small lots, they're not as valuable. Rethinking that in terms of what people really view as valuable. You're faced with this big challenge and this significant acreage that has been your mission to figure out what to do and how to do it. And you have, I think as Peter pointed out yesterday, you have a very reasonable plan that identifies all of the types of goals that communities looking to create complete places are looking for. It's the implementation now that becomes the big challenge. You can learn from local precedents. So how do you start breaking it up? How do you lay it out, without just running big highways through it and chopping it up into huge chunks? Here's the grid from historic Carmel. This is about a 200 by 400 grid. Works pretty well. I think property's worth a pretty decent amount in Carmel, right? Not so bad. Other places have done this new. So you go to a place like South Lake Town Square in Texas, and the designer there, Schwartz, looked at the historic grid of Fort Worth and just started laying it over this property, this empty property outside of Dallas and Fort Worth, to get a sense of what could we accommodate, what could we fit within this large space. You can do the same thing here, learn from your own communities. And you can learn from existing places. This is the Naval Postgraduate School. When I was doing some research on the community, I saw that the Del Monte Hotel, which burned down a couple times, was one of the first. Great stuff on the bottom, on the historic part, not so great stuff on the top. It's like the two different eras, right? It's the mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented era, and then at the top it's the single-use, automobile-dependent era. But great stuff right here at home you can learn from. I want to add just a couple notes to Peter's summary of Baldwin Park. This is one to take a closer look at that was decommissioned just about the same time, I think, as Fort Ord, and has brought about this amazing transformation over time. It's a different market, some different conditions, but look at the four-stage process that they followed. You have a base reuse plan, right? After their base reuse plan, they came up with a business and development plan, market study. Then they came up with an urban design vision plan, very specific, what type of uses, what type of development on the ground, in which places, and then a selection of a development team. And you could see this being done several times within the context of how much property you have to work with here. But Here's the master plan. It's actually not too far off from the quantity because you have so much land set aside for natural habitat and other things. This is a significant amount of land, 1,100 acres, and a decent amount of parks, another 200 acres, 4,300 units. The red is the town center. The community building process, which Bill Leonard's will talk about, which we have our students learn the process of the National Shred Institute every year at UM, is also critical. You've had a lot of input. I'm somewhat familiar with the process, the planning process in California. We did a plan for a section of East San Jose some years ago. You love planning here. But then the planning at some point has to stop and the implementation has to begin. That was kind of my frustration coming away. I felt like, we spent so much time having a dialogue and talking about what we would like, what everyone would like to see happen. The implementation just never seemed to get off the ground. Here's the team, the design team, actually laying out a huge model of the proposed development, testing out the guidelines for this property in Baldwin Park, not only so they could get a better sense of how things come together, the developer could look in very closely about what worked in terms of their product mix. The community officials could come in and comment on it, and they could move things around right there physically. There's nothing like a visual point of reference for understanding scale and what kind of development is happening, and the framing of streets, the framing of public space. It could happen real time right in front of people instead of in somebody's office. Lots of detail. This is how things get implemented and built and establish a level of quality. And then back to that process. It doesn't end with the plan. That's kind of the beginning to identify your goals and your vision. Then it gets down into the details. A couple of other quick examples and thoughts on implementation. We have a fantastic regional planning organization in Florida called the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. They assist communities, dozens of communities, in a big section of Florida with planning needs, and in particular with urban design, community design efforts. This was a big effort for a huge section in Palm Beach County that was called the Towns, Villages, and Countryside Plan. Really reminded me of your challenge here, because you're trying to, as they were, preserve a lot of the natural habitat, but then allow for development in a pattern that you think is compatible with your vision. So here's their area, here's the plan, really preserving a huge amount of land and agricultural land in this area, productive land, but then concentrating development in a pattern of towns and villages. And preserving a huge amount of open space for all kinds of purposes: natural habitat, wastewater reuse, education, recreation, agriculture research. When you compact, when you carefully manage development and concentrate it, then you can preserve so much of your natural beauty and use of the land. Here's one other example of a larger scale planning approach, identifying distinctive sections within a large community and the purposes associated with them, and then working with the community and with the developers and with the property owners to identify what's the potential for each, and coming up with basic design guidelines, not just for the buildings, but for the streets, for the public spaces, and working through what the details of the implementation would be over time, including the transit village. And then you can get down into really detailed small area plans beyond that. So I'm almost done. I'm going to end with some thoughts on FORA Design Principle 1, which is near and dear to my heart. Create a unique identity for the new community around the educational institutions. You have a huge amount of property here to work with, and that makes it a big challenge to create a distinctive sense of place and build a community around the university. And one of the things I noted in looking over the materials was this observation that under the 1998 master plan existing scenario, uses were so spread out that students need to drive between classes in order to be on time. Students aren't on time to start with. If they have to get in the car, forget about it. This creates the perceived need for more parking and lessens pedestrian interaction on campus. Need to, and I know you're rethinking this, you're reconsidering the campus plan, but look at, compared to, it's what we always do, look to what you think are the best examples. What's your aspiration in terms of a campus 10 years out, 20 years out? You know, what kind of place and what kind of community connected with that campus do you want to create? You really want to move from a campus land use plan to a college town plan. You know, the best campuses are always ones that integrate really closely with the community. I went to Chapel Hill. You walk off the campus right onto Franklin Street. You know, you all have your own examples. Here I picked one that Old Man Olmsted designed. Stanford did a pretty decent job. And you can actually, here's a great website. You can go and you pick two campuses and you view them side by side in their figure ground layout. So you get a sense of how the buildings in black shape the streets and the public spaces, and how walkable or compact, how much concentration takes place. People in universities and the whole idea of Innovation Hub love this. I will go anywhere on a campus where I can walk easily, and my role in the university is super interdisciplinary. Getting in a car is not really a good option for this kind of work. But here's a comparison of Santa Cruz and Stanford. And I know Santa Cruz has a nice core, but it's also like your campus, it's out of town, right? So you're really facing the challenge of creating your own community here, you know, you're outside of town. Stanford, on the other hand, is embedded. You know, there's Menlo Park, there's Palo Alto. You're really embedded in the community, an ideal situation. So you have this challenge in front of you. You're working at it incrementally. You want to attract a lot more students here. Look at the comparison between the two. This is at the same scale, the same aerial of your campus and the Stanford campus. You can pack a lot of stuff into a little area and create a lot more value and a lot more interaction. You can build it in to be a great place, and you can build in a community right here around the campus. Don't spread it all out. Final notes on implementation. Yes, you know, as mentioned yesterday, you need great sustained leadership. I think that's the important part of it. You need to sustain your focus on these issues, on implementation, on the details. Joe Riley's the classic example in Charleston. Has been doing it forever. You need to envision your roles as stewards of the effort going forward. Not just the existing plan, you're stewards of the implementation over time. And there's no reason why every community shouldn't get something out of this effort, but collectively you are stewards of the vision going forward. And then practical standpoint, I mentioned the Treasure Coast Regional Planning group. There's a method for assisting developers, communities, the FORA, the university in carrying out better development and improving the design. And that's through urban design centers. And there's different models. We brought all these different people to the Mississippi Gulf Coast after Katrina to have this discussion about trying to create a regional design center there. Mike Bush's, the Treasure Coast multiple community model, public. The Charleston model is direct to the mayor's office, under the mayor. And then the Nashville model is embedded in a university. You could have a design center embedded in the university here. This not only providing consultation for university campus planning and development, but for all development throughout FORA. So really instrumental organizations. We have a backgrounder on our website you could look at. In the end, you know, you take a look at the story of Baldwin Park on the City of Orlando website, and in the end, you do have to find the right development team to make it happen. So selecting that development team to make it happen is the final point of implementation. And then if you do it right, and this is my closing slide, here's a look at Baldwin Park. In a conventional development, this would have been a ditch. And it was a ditch. This would be the back of the buildings. This would be where nothing is located. This would be considered the throwaway space. What they did in Baldwin Park was transform it into an environmental feature. It performs environmental functions with respect to the water and the stormwater, but it also created the best addresses in the whole site. There's a public street that comes in along this waterway. The most valuable homes front this, and the public has access to the entire waterfront. It leads to the village center. It creates fabulous value by rethinking what public space means in relation to private development. So those are my thoughts, and Victor is going to take you off on a fabulous journey on street design. Thank you.